from the halls of parliament to the campuses of Israeli universities, the debate continued over the new government's proposed reforms for the judiciary. The Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee began its discussions on the plan, with Deputy Attorney General Gil Limon testifying that if it is adopted, quote, the government will not even be above the law, it will be the law. And at over a dozen universities and colleges across the country, thousands of students held a coordinated strike protest against what they call the dangerous liquidation of the justice system, though in some places they were met by counter-protesters supporting the reforms and also clashed with police. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking to his parliamentary faction in the Knesset, defended the proposals and slammed the media's coverage of it.
The discussion in most media channels around the legal reforms is deliberate, superficial, and one-sided. Everything is designed to create a false injustice about the end of democracy, the destruction of the country, and other slogans. The truth is, of course, the opposite. In a large majority of democracies in the world, the reforms introduced by Minister Yariv Levin are taking place. First, in almost all democracies in the world, elected officials are the ones who choose the judges. Only in Israel do judges have the right to veto the appointment of judges, and they are the ones who usually appoint their own friends and disqualify others.
And joining us now for more is our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. Owen, I hope at I-24 News we have tried to present more in-depth and balanced coverage of the judicial reforms. However, it does show, and the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu's comments show maybe nervousness over the strong public, at least part of the public reaction to it. Some polls have been shown that the majority of the Israeli public are not supporting it, though a majority of the Prime Minister Netanyahu's voters do, but not even at the amounts you would expect. So there is both the legislative battle, let's say, that's already started today in the Knesset. But beyond that, of course, there was also the public opinion battle for the hearts and minds of Israelis.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the Prime Minister is keeping his eye on those polls and on public opinion. And Calev, I do think that they have a role to play as the weeks go on and this legislation makes its way through the Israeli parliament. I don't think in this case that was the card Netanyahu was playing. This was a card meant for his base. This isn't the first time Benjamin Netanyahu has attacked the media, to say the least. And it's, again, part of his appeal to his base, part of his way of connecting with the base, the shared sense that the elite is arrayed against them, and the media is part of that. They're not getting a fair shake in the Israeli system. Again, playing on decades of victimhood that many parts of Israeli society have felt towards the establishment of the country that had founded the country and for a long period of time dominated it. So again, I think that's the card at play here. But you're absolutely right that polls are at the very least ambiguous and ambivalent about how Israelis feel about this. Most polls show a majority of the public, or at least a plurality of it, against the reforms. And even in the one poll from Israel's Channel 14, again, which is seen as being more right-leaning, that shows support among the public for at least large parts of the reform. Two of the key provisions, right? The override clause, where 61 members of the parliament can override many Supreme Court decisions, and the part of the plan that would get rid of the reasonableness standard that judges often use to strike down government decisions. Even in that poll, those provisions at least had a very narrow majority, or at least even a narrow majority against them. So you're absolutely right, Netanyahu has to be keeping an eye on the polls, and I do think that they matter.
Right, and of course now a big question is whether in this process that has just started in the parliament, in the Knesset, there may be any kind of room for compromise. And there were some like Benny Gantz in the opposition who say, yes, let's talk with the government, try to work it out. Merav Michaeli of the Labor Party coming out and saying, no, it's futile, and this whole proposal, in front of its very nature, is anti-democratic.
Well, listen, I mean, the committee hearings are a bit of a show, right? I mean, aren't they always? And it's an important show, right? When the Deputy Attorney General comes before the committee today and testifies against it, that's obviously an important piece of news, right? And we will get others from both sides as the hearings go on. Netanyahu also in his public statements, Calev, makes reference to the committee hearings, makes reference to the fact that, again, to paraphrase him, that there will be a sense of due process here, that each side will be able to get its arguments out. But that's a show. Again, the real decision about how to compromise and how far to go and whether to compromise is a decision that needs to be made, or at the very least implemented later on. So far, Netanyahu hasn't, in his public-facing statements, his on-the-record statements, shown much interest in having a real compromise. But of course, there have been leaks around the edges that there will be a sense of compromise. And I have said, and Netanyahu also in his public statement, by the way, Calev, doesn't rule out compromise. I have said for weeks, and nothing has changed my mind, that we are headed towards compromise, at least in the end game of this, but not yet.
All right, as you say, Prime Minister Netanyahu in his other comments today, again saying that he got a mandate. The current government said it was going to do these reforms, and they have a mandate to do it. Owen Alterman, thanks for joining us.